Live from the nation's capital, you're in the war room. It's Monday, the 11th of January, the year of our Lord, 2021. Now with a podcast has over 28 million downloads, and every day we're fighting for the number one space, usually sometimes number two, in Back of Pod Save America or NPR, but the number one conservative podcast in the nation. And remember, the podcast is only 20% of our distribution. We're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're also on Real America's Voice. We're streamed all over the world. We're on Roku, Pluto, Rumble, everywhere. Get massive distribution and the largest audience because we are also subtitled in Mandarin on G News and GTV for the diaspora of the Chinese people throughout the world. So I want to welcome our audience in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Europe, Middle East, and India. Okay, we're going to get to a lot going on today. We're very honored to have as our first guest the Attorney General of the state of Texas, Ken Paxton. General, there's been and I want to give a heads up to Raheem Kassam, my co-host, who's back from his show National Pulse, and Jack Posobiec, who on American News, are going to be here breaking down what happened last Wednesday. We're going to go into details and look at some footage and some timelines. General Paxton, there's been, I think right now, even moderates and some liberals, the ACLU and others, are kind of in shock about what's happened over the last couple of days by the big tech companies. I know you're a big First Amendment guy. Walk us through what your perspective is of what's happened over the last few days.
Well, it's pretty remarkable, maybe unprecedented in our country for companies like this to shut down free speech. And clearly that's what they're doing, to target the President of the United States and no longer allow him access based on his particular views. I think it's stunning. I can hardly believe this is happening, but in some ways, I'm not surprised given the power and what they have been moving towards over the last several years.
So, look, the state of Texas, because of the economic environment you've created down there, and obviously it's such a great place to live, and people enjoy it so much. There's a number of massive tech companies, not so much maybe in social media yet, but you got Elon Musk, I think you got Hewlett-Packard, you got some of the biggest, most storied names in the technology industry are all moving to Texas, mainly from California. How are you gonna juggle that now that you're going to be a headquarters? You know, maybe the second Silicon Valley. A lot of it's happened around Austin and the University of Texas. But how are Texans and how are you as Attorney General going to juggle this new move of tech companies into Texas, which has always been a state that believes in freedom, self-reliance, self-determination? How's that going to play?
Well, there's no doubt it's going to be a challenge. We are a place of freedom, of economic freedom, of free markets, and we believe in competition. But some of these tech companies like Google, which we have sued, have overstepped that bound, and they've treated competition very unfairly, shutting down other companies and creating really a monopoly on the internet for advertising. And we can't let that happen.
You know, if you look at the accountability for this, and if you just look at the timing of these things, you know, you've got obviously antitrust issues, so how big and how powerful they go. But if you look at how they've moved against, people like the President of the United States, we got taken down from YouTube, although we don't care because the rev deal was terrible anyway. And we were on many different platforms to begin with, like we're on 20 platforms. But for other people, if you took them down with YouTube, they'd be gone. So how are you going to hold them? I know you've sued Google, but don't you have a restraint of trade issue here? I mean, what happened over Thursday, Friday night, and then the complete takedown of Parler by going to the cloud, right? Do you believe you have a restraint of trade, or is it going to take kind of heroic attorney generals like yourselves, to maybe bind together with other heroic attorney generals to actually take these guys on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what we're looking at right now. I mean, we're looking at what they've done. We've had meetings already discussing what our possible ways of resolving this are. And so, yeah, in the coming days, in the coming weeks, you're going to see us doing something. What that is exactly, I'm not sure. Obviously, this happened just, a couple days ago. So we're just in the beginning stages of figuring out what we need to do and what we can do through the legal system.
General Paxton, and our guest is Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of the state of Texas. General Paxton, there was a letter sent by the state Senate of Pennsylvania to the Senate leadership, I think on Tuesday night, saying, hey, as we review this as the Senate of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have real concerns that the slate of electors were not forwarded in the appropriate manner, and we would like some period of time have them revert back to us, some short period of time for us to review the process with the Secretary of State to make sure we've done this constitutionally. In Georgia, same thing was brewing up. In Arizona, it was kind of one of the things the president and his constitutional lawyers were arguing. We needed just to kind of shut down the session, send it back to a couple of these states, have them review it over some short period of time and come back. In the page 3 of the impeachment document, which calls the impeaching the president for inciting, a violent insurrection, they get down to the heart of it. In page 3, they talk about the 2-month-long process of what he went around and gave false testimony, gave falsely accused of having voter fraud, ballot fraud, election fraud, and that's kind of the predicate for the entire case. You then see, these different state legislatures and subpoenas flying around, a lot of uncertainty in a number of states. And the reason we got taken down to YouTube, we had an interview with Rudy Giuliani, and we were just talking about election fraud, ballot fraud. And they said, hey, we've kind of ruled that out. You can't question it anymore. Joe Biden is the president of the United States, president-elect of the United States, and you cannot even discuss it anymore. And now it's in an impeachment document. Ted Cruz and others who had set up the second part of that process on Wednesday, when Vice President Pence did not agree in his letter with Eastman, agreed they wanted to go state by state for 6 states. And they're now being accused of being the treason caucus for actually wanting to just go through as the Electoral Count Act of 1887 lays out in 2 hours in the House, 2 hours in the Senate. Let's talk about it. Let's put the evidence out. Let's debate it. You were one of the leaders of the lawsuit that most people, quite frankly, thought had the highest opportunity to go to the Supreme Court. My question, with all of this out there, and the tech companies actually coming in and shutting down any discussion of that, and Nancy Pelosi and these Democrats actually trying to impeach a president with this as a predicate, the even discussion of, was this election legal? Was it fair? Was there voter fraud? Was there ballot fraud? Was there election fraud? And I'm not talking about servers on the moon or gun battles in Paris. The state of Texas went through and listed out why Dominion should never be signed up, and I think that's pretty clear. So just leave all the craziness aside. As Attorney General, and particularly the guy that put forward the most well-argued case out there to go to the Supreme Court, where do you think we stand in even questioning what happened in this election?
So you ask a very good question. As you know, our lawsuit was pretty simple. It was basically saying that these states didn't follow state law and they didn't follow the U.S. Constitution in following their own legislative statutes, and therefore their results have problems. And we wanted the Supreme Court to analyze that and deal with that issue. And unfortunately, the only place that we can file is U.S. Supreme Court. When you sue another state, when a state sues a state, we have one place to have our grievance heard, and unfortunately, the court decided they weren't even going to hear it. So I think that was a huge mistake on the court's part. I think the founders required that. But now it's supposedly you're committing treason if you ask the question of how much fraud. We know there is fraud in every election, but how much fraud was committed here? And looking into the process, just think about what happened. We had just think about Pennsylvania. We went from 233,000 mail-in ballots 4 years ago to almost 2.5 million this time. So we already know in the state of Texas that those ballots have a much higher degree of fraud than when you go vote in person with a photo ID. Add into the fact that they did not do signature verification for a high percentage of those ballots. Now you can't even verify, you can't even go back and tell whether there was fraud because they separated the signature now from the ballot. So it's the perfect way if you were going to cheat, if you were going to commit fraud, it would be the perfect way to do it. And now we're being told it's treason to go back and ask the question, how did this happen and was it fraudulent?
General Paxton, this is why we keep saying it. We believe we're in a constitutional crisis here because, correct me if I'm wrong, from your legal perspective, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona, even in Michigan, understanding the electors did go and the Electoral College met and then the Congress verified it. So in process-wise, it's totally done. And Joe Biden will get inaugurated at noon on the 20th. But isn't it a constitutional question? In your mind, legally, have those issues really been solved since all these letters flying around are still out there that have not been addressed yet?
Look, if I were Joe Biden, I would want those questions answered too, because for him to have legitimacy, the American people have to believe that he was elected the right way. And so many Americans are concerned that it didn't happen correctly, that there was fraud. So if I'm Joe Biden, I want to get to the bottom of this too. If I were Joe Biden, I would put together a commission, and I would study this so that in future elections we have more credibility, we have less question about whether there's been fraud. Because this is the election, at least in my lifetime, that has created the most questions about whether there was a legitimate vote for the president.
General Paxton, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. Is it treason to question where we stand in these states right now? In your mind, legally, does that rise to the level of treason?
It's called the Constitution. It's called the First Amendment. And when tech companies and when government starts telling us that we can't question our government, we can't question election results, then we've got a real problem, because the Constitution no longer is fundamental to what we believe and what we're doing. So yes, absolutely, under the Constitution, under the First Amendment, we can question until we're blue in the face and nothing bad should happen to us. That doesn't seem to be the direction we're going, and pretty scary.
And you also believe, I take it, if it's not treason, you also believe it's not sedition and it's also not insurrection. To raise these questions and to talk about where they stand in the legal process or where they stand in the legislative process, it is not insurrection, it is not sedition, and it is not treason.
It would be in China, but it shouldn't be in the United States. That's what our country's all about. We are about freedom of speech. We've always been about freedom of speech. And when you're suddenly accused of treason and sedition, then we're a lot more like China than we ever thought we could be.
Last question, General Paxton, you're a man of action. A lot of people in this movement, a lot of conservatives and Republicans look to you. Can you give us, where do you go from here on this issue?
So I think we've got two things to deal with. We've got to figure out some way to go to these states that had issues. If you look at Texas, we had issues too. We could have been Georgia. We fought off 12 lawsuits in Harris County, which is Houston, our largest county. They were going to mail out over 2 million mail-in ballots. In Travis County, which is Austin, we had the same issue. Had we not fought these off, and we were told by a federal judge that signature verification is unconstitutional. We fought that off, went to the Fifth Circuit. We had 12 lawsuits. We fought. We won every single one of them because we had to. And had we not done that, we would have fallen into the camp of being like Georgia, Wisconsin. These other states didn't do that. We have to go back and talk to them and teach them and show their legislatures, here's what you need to do. Because if you don't fix this now while you have a Republican legislature, we may never be able to fix it. And then as it relates to these tech companies, we have to hold them accountable for basically ruining free speech in this country, because they have, in some cases, a monopoly on how speech is done. And we can't allow that to happen if we're going to remain a free and open society.
General Paxton, how do people follow you during the day? Do you have a social media that you can put out there that people can follow you and get more acquainted with your thinking?
That's a good question. Give it to me. My guy's sitting right here. I never.
You're like me.
Text AG. Oh,
that's it. Just Texas AG.
Just text AG. Just Google it.
Texas AG.
Don't Google it.
Attorney General Ken Paxton from the state of Texas, a real leader. Thank you very much for joining us in the War Room, sir.
It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. Taking down the CCP, spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP.
Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room. Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. We got a lot to go through today. Got Posobiec in studio with Raheem, and we had to get, once Raheem heard Posobiec was going, all of a sudden he made himself available. As you know,
can't be outshined
exactly.
Here on my own show.
Oh, we'll have you just call in, and Raheem will be fine.
No,
I want to go back to Paxton.
Yeah,
let's take before we get to the big tech. I want to talk about the issues of CNBC's breaking that the local U.S. The attorney for the District of Columbia is looking to file charges on Don Jr., Rudy, Professor Eastman, Mo Brooks, for and maybe the president for inciting a riot. Right? Thoughts?
The first thought I had when I saw that is, and on my show at 3 p.m., I went through everything that happened last year. 25 people dead minimum. That's numbers from the Guardian newspaper, by the way.
Who are not running the number up.
Right. So my first thought was, where do we have Republican attorneys general across the country who saw violence, property damage, battery, and even murder happen in their states? And why was no Democrat ever charged with incitement? There are plenty of examples of the incitement that came from Democrat Party politicians. The vice president-elect told people to go out.
Did the U.S. attorneys, when we talked about, had Liz Euron here about sending tiger teams out, were no Antifa or radical members of BLM ever charged with incitement or insurrection in Portland or Seattle?
There was nothing like that. You had 2 months full. Mayor Ted Wheeler went out to the Portland federal courthouse and stood with them while they threw incendiary devices against federal officers there at that courthouse. He marched with those people. And yet nobody went after him. Nobody even talked to him. I don't even know if he got a phone call.
And if any indictments were given, no indictments for incitement of insurrection.
Certainly, yeah.
What was the damage? You gave us a number, I think, on the morning show.
$2 billion was a conservative estimate of the damage done across the country. That's according to insurance firms.
This is the most damaging riots America has seen in U.S. history.
25 dead, hundreds injured, right? And you go through the list. It was indiscriminate violence. It was violence against America. Left-wingers died, right-wingers died, media types died, small children were shot as a result of this.
Police officers.
And David Dorn, right? So David, let's talk about David Dorn. Jack, you started the GoFundMe for his family. And by the way, the media attacked Jack when he started the GoFundMe for David Dorn's poor family. Why didn't a Republican AG in Missouri charge any Democrats with incitement that led to the murder of David Dorn?
We raised nearly $500,000 for his family through, actually, Fundly, not GoFundMe, because I don't trust those guys.
Sure.
But they went after us for raising the money rather than talk about who incited the riot, who was actually participating in it. And it was a war zone.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this not Bill Barr? I got AGs, and you should have more aggressive AGs, although most of these are in Democratic areas. But Liz Ure said you should be tiger teams. If you want to shut this down, he sent tiger teams out there, prosecutors and assistant U.S. attorneys. You can shut it down quickly. Was Bill Barr not the Attorney General of the United States? Bill Barr, and didn't Bill Barr report to
We
President
were told that the Joint Terrorism Task Forces of the 56 major cities around the United States were going to be looking into Antifa, into anarchists, into all of these different disparate acts that were done throughout 2020 that Raheem is talking about. The Guardian says 25. I've seen plus 30 plus bodies that people were killed last year. And how many of those were actually indicted? And if we're talking about incitement to riots, who incited those riots? Who incited Chaz, where black teenagers were shot dead, multiple black teenagers, when Mayor Jenny Durkin, disgraceful Mayor Jenny Durkin, said it was going to be a summer of love? I was there. I said to shut it down. She wouldn't.
Yeah, I feel like I'm losing my mind here because the level of gaslighting and the level to which kind of the frog is being boiled on this thing, it is extraordinary that we're even discussing a situation where we're not allowed to say certain things. Cumulus Radio Network is saying you can't even mention election fraud on air anymore. That's the network that Bongino and Levin and Shapiro and all these guys are on, is saying you may not even mention this stuff. Can I just remind people that it is 4 years plus 1 day to the day that BuzzFeed published a false, fake dossier about the President of the United States that led to national security implications, that led to attorney generals having to, put themselves on the sidelines. By the way, that led to a Mueller investigation
given to him by Comey as a setup. I told him at that time. I told him that evening. This is New York Times. This thing's been around forever. What you're going to see is some third-rate organization that can publish it, and then they'll report on that. And that's what happened. BuzzFeed
No. It was Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper was the one who had that first, and then BuzzFeed had the whole thing.
Well, Jake Tapper made a mention, but it got printed. The dossier got printed in BuzzFeed. That's
But
where
it was
he talked about
February
the rumor.
10th, 2017.
Tapper was the one who made it go big.
Well, he made it go big, but they're the
Yeah.
ones that put it out there. My point is that it was totally phony from the beginning. That's why they had to put it in BuzzFeed, and then it got blown up, right? I want to go back to
Just
this.
making sure Jake T gets credit.
No, I want to go back to the frog is boiling. Why are people not standing up right now? We're not justifying the riot and what happened. What happened with these folks over here? That's all got to be investigated, gone through. The guilty have to be held accountable. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And we've said from the beginning, the power of these marches up to that day was the peaceful nature of it. That's why the 12th of November rattled this city to its bones, not violence. It was so big, so peaceful, but had righteous indignation about it, right? So, but go back to this. Why are none of the Republican people up here, the elected officials, even discussing what went before and why they were not held accountable?
I'm almost stunned into silence when I think about it all and I process all of this. When I process the fact that the media that's on the same people that are on television right now saying people who say that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president are insurrectionists were the ones who, as you put it, Steve, ran the most comprehensive nullification project of a president for half a decade in people's faces. You remember the weaponization of the national security apparatus of the United States of America to benefit the Uniparty, to benefit the party of Davos that didn't want to see Donald Trump, guess what, return power to people's pockets, return power to people who didn't want to go take their country to war again. And now we're being told by these same people who back then fed us a tissue of lies about Russia and all of this stuff, and now telling us, well, you may not talk about, the election being defrauded. Nancy Pelosi tweeted.
I was just going to say that.
Go ahead.
She had Nancy Pelosi's tweet. We've got it. I think it's May, right? May 2017. The election was hijacked. We need to fight for our democracy. That's Nancy Pelosi. And I would note that Twitter, Jack Dorsey, there's no label, little fact check on that tweet. This is in dispute because official sources have called the election for Donald J. Trump.
Okay, here's the deal. There are at least 40% of people out there who believe that things were not kosher at this election.
No, they think, let's be blunt, they think it was either stolen or it's illegal or illegitimate. That's what they think. At least 40%, probably 46%.
40% that are willing to tell pollsters that.
Exactly.
A stranger calling you on the phone.
Right.
Right? Now, let me talk about it this way. And I want to address people out there listening. There are some of you out there who work for big corporate entities. There are some of you out there who work for these entities that have signed letters telling the president to resign. There are some of you out there who work for big tech Silicon Valley companies that listen to this show. There are some of you out there who are scared to speak up because you might lose your job, you might lose your livelihood. But let me tell you something. That is nothing compared to losing your country. That is nothing compared to losing the Constitution. That is nothing compared to how you will feel in 10 years' time, knowing you could have stood up, spoken out, connected with somebody, Jack Posobiec, Project Veritas, whoever it is, and said, I have the skinny on what's taking place, and I'm going to stand up, and I do not believe that this should be going on in the United States of America.
They want to turn this country into a one-party state. They want to rule out any meaningful opposition. You heard Joe Biden even say this himself. He kind of accidentally let it slip. He said, well, I think we do need a Republican Party, but, and then he went on to say a Republican Party that doesn't really challenge us on any serious issues, that largely agrees with us, but really just a Democrat light.
Controlled opposition. By the way,
they want the Washington Generals.
Well, the Washington Generals, people have to understand, in communist China, there are some Democrat.
There's five. There's
five parties. They're just guys that go to annual meetings and hang out. It's called controlled opposition. That's what they want. They want the controlled opposition. Talk about what Marcuse, when you guys had this discussion the other day, Jack, you weren't back. What happened on the Wikipedia page?
Gone. So we mentioned this the other day. I was talking about repressive tolerance. Raheem broke down
what is a repressive tolerance?
Repressive tolerance means that for the liberal, progressive, enlightened ones, you must be intolerant to anyone who is not on the left progressive axis as you are. Wikipedia has now taken down the site, their article for repressive tolerance.
They don't. They're saying the silent part out loud. Before we go to break, Raheem.
No, this is precisely what all of the greatest authors of the 20th century warned us would happen when you put enough power into the hands of a limited number of people who have no feedback, no mechanism by which to remove them from power,
And no accountability.
And we didn't heed the words.
Okay, we're going to get into the details when we come back. It is Steve Bannon. We got Raheem, Kassam, Jack Posobiec. You're in the war room for a heated conversation. We're going to go back to walk through the timeline, exactly what happened, some insights from Jack. Also want to talk about fast. We're going to have an individual on in the next couple of days who's going to talk about fast and the nation taking a fast and offering it up in is a contemplative action to divine providence. I want to talk about a commercial fast. I want to talk about closing your wallet, not a blacklist. Just stop buying when we return on War Room Pandemic.
And you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, we've got breaking news coming out of Capitol Hill. Raheem, what is going on? First off with Chuck Schumer, and then I want to talk about McCarthy and what's coming out of the White House.
Yeah, that's right. The latest reports state that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is exploring whether to use an emergency authority to reconvene the Senate for an impeachment trial before Trump leaves office next week, which would require support from Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. You've also got news coming out of the Hill, and it's two conflicting pieces of information here. One from the congressional reporter from Politico who says, and pay attention to this, McCarthy tells Republicans on a call just now that Trump told him he does bear some responsibility for the Capitol riots. That's per a source for Politico. And then pushback on that.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, pushback on that. Coming from the New York Magazine HuffPost contributor Yashar Ali, who says it was McCarthy who said Trump is responsible, not Trump saying that he was responsible. And they're going back and forth in real time about this right now.
McCarthy said that on a call. McCarthy said that to reporters.
McCarthy apparently says it on a call, and one of the people on the call appears to have said it to Politico.
Listen, there's a lot going on here. Everything's breaking second by second. You have two pincer moves. This process is to get the toxicity level of Donald J. Trump to be higher than, if you saw the film Chernobyl, the 5-hour HBO, when the cobalt comes off the roof and the guy picks it up and his arm, 30 minutes later is gone. They want Trump to be as toxic as that cobalt. Okay, they want to be beyond radioactive. They want nobody to be able to go around him, and that's why from a corporate side, they're deplatforming people, debanking people. Dr. Yan came on this morning and said they're disappearing you. They're doing that. The two pincer moves is the one's playing out today and tomorrow, which is to really try to humiliate President Trump, to kind of force him to resign, or have Mike Pence then go to the cabinet and implement the 25th Amendment. She says if she doesn't get that, they're going to have basically a limited debate is what we're hearing on Wednesday, a limited debate, and then a vote on impeaching the president. And Chuck Schumer is just saying now that he wants to get this. He wants to do a trial, I guess, before Trump leaves office. Remember that the outcome of that, besides making toxic with the 25th Amendment and the impeachment, is the reason they want to have a trial is they want to take Trump out of being a candidate in 2024. They believe by impeaching him and finding him guilty this time at trial, they can actually take off the ability to hold federal office again, including the office of the President of the United States. So we take him out as being a candidate. This is it's very heated. It's a little uncertain right now. Nobody really knows what the rules are. It's kind of uncertain up here. What we like about the impeachment, we said, hey, bring it, is that the predicate of it, page 3 lays out the predicate. What they say is that all the false claims and false statements that President Trump made in the months after the November 3rd election, that, everything about there was ballot fraud, there was election fraud, there was voter fraud, they call that false, and they say that set up the heat or the anxiety that led to the what they call a violent insurrection. And so that is what we think it's an excellent opportunity, since it really didn't happen the other night because of the riot. When the House and the Senate came back, they kind of, they finished Arizona in kind of a half-hearted way. I think the House actually did I think the House did Pennsylvania, but the Senate didn't, and they kind of moved on. So the receipts have never been shown. And I can tell you, President Trump, I think, will volunteer to go up and actually make the case to the House of Representatives himself, state by state, vertical by vertical, of how this thing was stolen. So he's not shy about it. Okay. Anything else on that before we move on? Raheem, you're Jack?
The one thing I want to hit out of CNN that they're reporting in multiple sources, but listen to the way CNN has it. So up to 15 Capitol Police officers are now under investigation, and 2 have been suspended. Listen to this. For their alleged role in participating in last week's riot, said Rep. Tim Ryan, chair of the House subcommittee investigating the response. Of the 2 people suspended, one was seen taking a selfie with the rioters, and another, this is CNN, by the way, and another was, quote, an officer that put on a MAGA hat and started directing people around. So this is something that we've been talking about from day one, that we were seeing these videos of officers, some that were opening doors, some that were letting people in, the crowd thinking that they're being invited in, not sure what's going on, this kind of response. Now we have confirmation for that from Capitol Police themselves, from Rep. Tim Ryan, from the House Subcommittee, and CNN, all reporting that what we said that we saw in those videos was actually true.
This is what, Raheem, jump in. Look, the violence is inexcusable. However, there's something just not right here. You can tell right now. I think, Raheem, you got the picture. The Capitol Hill is now, I guess, close to an armed camp.
Yes.
Right. There's 7,500 National Guard troops or Army Reserve troops, I guess, some combination. They've requested more. It's going to be 10,000, I think, by this weekend. There's now the bike racks all over, separating every building up here, and the guys on every. I think we got it up there. You see,
You've
right
got to
there.
zoom in on this. I want Real America's Voice to zoom in on this image here as well. Just get closer up there. This is just one building on Capitol Hill. All of them are like this right now. You see the scale of militarization that's going on here. And by the way, these National Guard members are then every 10 or 15 foot, there are another handful of them. And what's really interesting, Jack, back me up on this, the corporate media is not showing pictures of Capitol Hill like this. They are not informing Americans that their capital has been effectively militarized and occupied under the false pretense.
Well, what's amazing to me is, and by the way, as a guy that served at Guantanamo Bay, I'll tell you right now, there are more troops and more defenses, more lockdown in Washington, D.C. right now than there are in Guantanamo Bay, period. All right? But we had the same thing. Go back to June of 2020 when we had federal troops in the city, federal troops in the district. We had law enforcement at the federal level that President Trump and AG Barr had called in, and the corporate establishment media was mercilessly attacking the president for bringing those troops in to keep the city safe because there were riots, there were churches on fire, there were streets on fire, police cars were being attacked, Molotov cocktails were being thrown, etc., etc. All that was going on. Corporate media excoriated President Trump for this. Now, when it's going on this time, there's not a peep.
Okay, this morning I mentioned the Gulag Archipelago, right? And I really think it's worth considering some of the lines from the just the first chapter of this, because things are accelerating at such a speed. I mean, they're now investigating Capitol Hill police officers, right? Think about that, and think about who's going to be disappeared tomorrow. And you're just going to turn around and go, oh, well, it's just one person. Let's see what happens to the next person. And that's exactly what takes place in the Gulag Archipelago. At the beginning, quote, universal innocence also gave rise to the universal failure to act. Maybe they won't take you. The majority sit quietly and dare to hope. Since you aren't guilty, how can they arrest you? It's a mistake. They are already dragging you along by the collar, and you still keep exclaiming to yourself, it's a mistake. They'll set things straight and let me out. Others are being arrested en masse, and that's a bothersome fact, but in those other cases, there's always some dark area, right? Maybe he was guilty. But as for you, you're obviously innocent. You still believe that the organs are humanly logical institutions. They will set things straight and let you out. Why then should you run away? And how can you resist right then? After all, you'll only make your situation worse. You'll only make it more difficult for them to sort out the mistake. And it isn't just that you don't put up any resistance, you even walk down the stairs on tiptoe as you're ordered to do so your neighbors won't hear. At what point should one resist? It's extraordinary.
Very powerful. Let's go to big tech of what they've done, particularly Parler. What other moves are they going to make?
Well, Facebook is now saying it's removing all content mentioning Stop the Steal. Every single thing mentioning Stop the Steal is going to be removed. That was as of this afternoon. This is again, the speed at which this is moving is faster than anybody can deal with.
You've also got Airbnb now is saying that they're reviewing anyone who's made a reservation in Washington, D.C., and I don't understand how they're reviewing people. It sounds to me that they're checking your social media now, because a lot of people, they'll sign in to Airbnb using their Facebook account. So you're looking at, again, more coordination, cartelization of these social media corporations that are working in concert to decide whether or not you're allowed to use their content, because maybe you post hashtag MAGA. Also, we saw that with the, they're saying that the National Guardsmen that are being called in for the inauguration, they're having their social media checked to see whether or not they have, quote, loyalties towards domestic terrorism.
And so they're referring to this. And if the Republicans don't stand up now and start beating back on this domestic terrorism, they're going to get rolled, and it's going to have massive implications. We got to take your stand now. That's why I know a lot of people are saying, hey, this thing's over. I thought he's going to step up. I thought all this was going to happen. I thought the Kraken was going to get released. It didn't. Joe Biden's in. Let me go. I got to go. I want to go play golf, or I'm just going to stop. You can't do that. If you're going to fight for your country, you're going to have to fight for it. So this fight is going to take place in the halls of Congress and take place in the courts. It's going to take place in the grassroots and signing people up. Remember, we won a huge victory. Actually, the state party level, at the state level, in Congress, the House, in the Senate, everything except, oddly, President Trump. We won a massive victory. So it's, and by the way, President Trump, we won a massive victory. We just didn't close the deal because we allowed, as Raheem, you pointed out months ago, the plot to steal 2020, they were able to pull off. So I want to go. We got a couple minutes left, and because we're going to have some breaking news. Boris Epstein's actually got unbelievable news about what's going to happen on the impeachment on Wednesday, about the debate. Anything about the reporting you guys have been doing about the timing of all this, and we're going to see any more revelations about why the Army was not called in, why the National Guard was not here, why U.S. Marshals were not around. Why'd you just have a handful of Capitol Hill police with the bike racks down at the Capitol?
Look, you can see again and again in the timeline, the Washington Post had the article, of course, Raheem mentioned this earlier, that they were not accepting any of the offers from DOD to bring people out there. Look, when Muriel Bowser said that the National Guard was going to come in, I don't think that anybody in the Trump movement, any of the MAGA supporters, even said no to that. They welcomed the National Guard being there.
Well, it seemed logical.
It seemed logical, of course.
You're going to have 1 million people, although the last time it was incredibly peaceful. If they're going to bring out the National Guard.
But it was a couple, look, I walked down, there was a couple of unarmed guys on the side of the road wearing black vests. They weren't really doing anything. And they weren't, but here's the key, by the way. The National Guardsmen that I saw, at least, were not at the Capitol.
Why were they?
were on Pennsylvania Avenue.
I keep feeling that, hey, was this, I'm not saying a setup, but why was there not more of U.S. Marshals, of National Guard, of DHS, of all the types of people we see all the time, with the State of the Union or some big, guy from a foreign head of state, all of that? Why was it not here?
There's only two things that could have happened on Wednesday in this regard. Number one is that they failed to plan. They failed to do the background information, and they failed to figure out who was coming, and that there were troublemakers and agitators that were going to be there from. And by the way, I don't believe for a second that they didn't do that. Background.
They're all telling you they have the intel now.
Yeah, right. And because also you know full well that they always and by the way, all those people plan quite openly. It's very easy to find.
I mean, that was
where
the whole
their plans
pretext for the takedown of Parler.
Right. And the second part of that, so they either didn't do the planning or they allowed it to happen. And we now know, of course, that people refused again and again and again to reinforce the Capitol building despite knowing what was coming.
How could that possibly happen, given that this is something you can run that play in every country in the world? These guys are professionals. In fact, they could go between cities and do it. After 7 requests, what in the chain of command made a decision not to have reinforcements out there?
Look, you've got to have someone at the high level of the city of Washington or in DOD, Secretary of the Army, that had a complete breakdown.
What about Chad Wolf? Just put his resignation. He's out. What about Chad Wolf?
Where's Chad Wolf in any of that? Chad Wolf.
Isn't that really his job, or one of his jobs is to oversee that?
Yeah.
Okay, short commercial break. We've got breaking news. Boris Epstein is going to join us for a minute in the D block. We're going to take a short commercial break. We'll return in a second.
Everything's just beginning, but the games you want to play it's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. Cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
You two guys are worked up. Is it reading? I know you're Polish. Is it him reading Russian literature that's got you both? Raheem, you've got the old moral outrage of the old days. I'm glad Russian literature does this. But Posobiec, Raheem, tell me what's your guys' issues?
Look, I mean, and I'll say this right now, Steve. I've talked to a lot of the deplorables out there. I talked to them. I'm still up on Twitter for the time being. They feel abandoned right now. They don't feel like anyone's representing them. They feel like totally adrift, that they were told, hey, this is going to happen. This is the way it's going to go. We're going to go fight. And then poof, and nobody's there. No elected officials, no party officials, none of the 2024, these so-called,
But if it's one thing to come and say, hey, we're going to fight and we're going to let these guys know you got to do this and Pence has got to do this and nothing. If you're coming to be violent, people are not going to have your back because you're going to lose. You're going to walk into a narrative.
I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the tens of thousands of people that showed up peacefully and are now getting canceled for it.
99%.
The 99% versus the 1%.
Yes, the people that went back on the plane and got canceled because they looked like Trump supporters, and so all of a sudden they're on the domestic flight list. Raheem.
I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, where is the President of the United States?
Well, he was supposed to give a big tech throwdown today, so maybe it'll be tonight or maybe it'll be tomorrow. Something's
He's still president? Still president? Right now?
The State Department doesn't seem to think so.
State Department. Was that real?
Tell people quickly what
By
happened.
the way, the State Department's website was updated today to say that the president's term ended at 7:49 p.m. today.
Yeah.
Right? And then they come out and they say, it's a disgruntled employee. Remember, if it was the other way, it would be a coup, it would be an insurrection.
Right. Terrible. Okay, let's go to we got Boris Epstein from the president's legal team from the campaign with breaking news on the impeachment process. Page 3 in the impeachment process, the indictment against the president for inciting a violent insurrection. Boris lays out the predicate is all about his false claims about ballot fraud, voter fraud, election fraud throughout the 6 battleground states. So is he going to get a full chance on Wednesday to present his case?
Steve, good to be with you as always in the Patriots at the War Room. Thanks to all of your viewers and listeners for the MAGA brain trust, as we call them. So here's the deal. It is obvious that the Democrats and their cohorts in big tech, what's happening with YouTube, obviously Twitter, Facebook, are trying to shut down any and all discussion of the legitimate claims of voter fraud, election fraud that we've gone through on this show time and time again in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. The hundreds of thousands of ballots in Wisconsin, which were cast unlawfully, in Georgia, where they found thousands of pro-Trump ballots in pro-Trump counties, in Georgia, where dead people were voting, where people who were out-of-state voters out-of-state residents were voting, in Arizona, illegal immigrants voting.
So is the president going to get a chance to talk about that on Wednesday?
Well, here's the problem. And I'm not trying to get you kicked off whatever outlets you're still on here and prevent you from being back on YouTube. I'm just laying out the truth. Nancy Pelosi is trying to follow exactly what these big tech tyrants have done. She's trying to prevent any debate. Tomorrow, there's only debate on the resolution regarding the 25th Amendment. I got that directly from a Top Hill staffer within the last several minutes. So that's tomorrow. And then what the Democrats are saying is that if they don't get what they want in terms of the 25th Amendment, which they will not, they're going to move right to the floor on impeachment. So no Judiciary Committee, no debate in Judiciary Committee. They don't want Jim Jordan. They don't want Andy Biggs. They don't want Matt Gaetz being able to go out there and specifically lay out the case of why these claims of election fraud are not baseless, why they are very meritorious. And then, of course, they don't want to hear about the fact that President Trump, in his speech, said specifically the words peaceful. He called on Americans to be peaceful as they have their voices be heard at the U.S. Capitol.
Okay, so
what is wrong with that? What is wrong?
Okay, hang on for a second. if there's no committee meeting and there's no debate in the committee, if it's going to go to the floor, is it going to be a floor debate where you take a couple hours and they can talk about the 6 states and show the receipts? Or is there going to be time in the general? Is there going to be a floor debate?
As of right now, it appears there may be time for the floor debate. They're being called into session at 9 a.m. on tomorrow, on Tuesday, and on Wednesday. And remember, impeachment is only going to be up on Wednesday because of the 48-hour rule. So on Wednesday, they're going to be in session at 9 a.m., and there appears to be some time built in. But again, this is now becoming at the discretion of Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is installing herself as the dictator of the House of Representatives and setting the rules without any deference, any consideration for true democracy, for real representation of the president, for real information to be put out there. That's not what she wants. She wants to ram this impeachment through and further divide this country and try to take away the voice of the American people, the voice of the MAGA movement.
This feels like a Moscow show trial from the 1930s. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. Boris, what's your social media? We got to bounce here. We're out of time.
My social media, Boris_Epstein, Boris_EPSHTEYN on Instagram, on Twitter, where I've lost almost 20,000 followers because of the tyrannical Twitter purge, at BorisEP, and then at Boris on Parler, as long as there's Parler, Boris_EPSHTEYN on Instagram, at BorisEP on Twitter, at Boris on Parler. God bless, rock and roll, stay strong.
Thank you. Okay, I want you to text War Room, that's one word, War Room, to the number 888-111 and download the Real America's Voice app, or go to warroom.org, that's all one word, warroom.org, or America's Voice, one word, americasvoice.news. Also go to Rumble, all the podcast platforms. You can go to Populist Press, that's one word, populistpress.com. You go to Creative Destruction Media, CDM. Many others will be talking about in the next couple of days. Jack, what are you working on overnight? People should follow you.
Showing what actually happened there at the Capitol. I was on the roof. I've got the video. Tens of thousands. The 99%.
The roof opposite. Not you went on the roof of the Capitol.
Yeah. The roof opposite, of course.
You're the one America.
The 99. We got the footage there. 99%.
That's
tens of thousands of peaceful protesters marching.
That's where we did our election night coverage. So it'll be great. When's that footage going up?
Oh, it's going to go up for, tonight, I believe.
Tonight. Okay. And what's your Twitter so people can follow you?
Jack Posobiec. Posobiec.
Raheem, in 10 seconds, 15 seconds. What are you working on for tomorrow?
Well, we didn't get to talk about the spending, and we'll talk about that tomorrow morning. But we are working on a full list of corporations.
The blacklist. Here's what we're going to talk about tomorrow: a commercial fast. You should obviously buy food. You got to buy necessities, but it's time to understand your votes count, but your dollars count even more. And there's two ways dollars go: taxes. Let's not go there yet. Let's just go to commercial spending. All MAGA world is going to sit there and just we're going to hibernate. There's no need to buy anything right now outside of basic necessities. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow. See you tomorrow morning.